I'm trying to get some thoughts down on paper, and I did send a chat to Kathy Connors this morning about the weird sensations of when you can feel your body breaking down, and compared it to the weird feeling I had when I was pregnant and my body was doing its own thing without me having any sort of control. Just trying to get my thoughts together. I have to think about what today's date is. Today's date is the end of October. So let's see what that is. It's soon Halloween. Everybody's into that. It's October 27th. It's a Sunday morning. Last week, Susan was here, and 2 weeks prior to that, Karina was here. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 days until we have our open house. So we're having an open house here in Cleveland at the house where we live at 773 Crabapple Lane. And I tell everybody it's a white house with a blue shutters and a yellow door, so it's easy to recognize. So I have a story about the house, and I have a story about moving to Tennessee, and I have a story about all the things that have happened in my life. And I want to tell you that I have had a very full life. So maybe we'll have a couple more days. I have two more goals, and one is to go vote tomorrow or Tuesday, and the other one is to finish talking about all these thoughts that are in my head. So I'm hoping to record them, and I'm not getting my memoir written because I did talk some silly stories into the computer, but they're not in any order, and I have a lot of prompts and stuff I completed for Karina, but there's no rhyme or reason to it. But basically, I've had a very fun and full life, and I love people, and I've had such fun because we had whatever that was, 60 years, I guess, in Pennsylvania, and that was all over York County, and then 6.5 years in North Carolina, where I met some fabulous people that are great friends. And then we've been here in Tennessee. What is it? From 2021, that's 22, 23, 24, that's 3.5 years, and made tons of friends here. So somehow I've collected a lot of people and a big network all through my life. I did enjoy the conversation I had with Aunt Cindy, and she simplified life in 2 ways. So it's not a Briggs-Myers test or a personality test. It's just a general lump of 2 kinds of people in the world, those that are on stage and those that are in the audience. And my gifts was that I was always on stage, rarely in the audience, and I make things happen. And I guess I had the gift of planning things and had lots of ideas that I wanted to execute, just like doing this now. But also lost my train of thought. This is the problem with being old, that a lot of it I planned and wanted to do, but a lot of it was when God used me, and I was totally unaware that this was going to happen and turn into such wonderful things. So, where to begin? I began with the date, and I began with the fact that I'm laying in bed and hospice is coming all the time. It's Mondays and Thursdays, the aide comes, Tuesdays and Fridays, the nurse comes, Wednesdays, the chaplain comes, and on Fridays, the social worker comes. Robert's here. He's taking care of me. He's a wonderful keeper. Sorry about that. And takes care of all the cooking, the kitchen, the cleanup. I haven't been in the kitchen but once this month, I think. Cleaning the bathroom, taking care of cleaning up, doing the sheets, doing the laundries. He's doing all that. Plus, he's still doing his own thing. So he goes to cornhole, he goes to game night, he goes to bowling twice a week and plays chair volleyball. So I do miss that, and he gets to see a lot of people. So even though Robert's not a big people person, he does enjoy being out with folks, more so than he ever did earlier in his life, I think. That's probably the biggest change in him. He does care for me. He's telling me my body's deteriorating, which I can feel that happen almost day by day. So things are kind of weird right now because my mind is sharp. I want to talk, I want to visit to people, and I want to record my life. But at the same time, my body's like going crazy. I'm very thin. I don't know if you can see my thin arm, but it's thin and very dry. And my epiphany this morning was I got awake and did a stretch and had my hand on my thigh, and I felt the leather-like skin. So something that happens as your body shuts down is it is dehydrated, mostly because I have trouble eating and drinking. So that's part of the process. And I did have a good bit of liquid and some food yesterday and felt pretty good, which is why I feel pretty good today. So this is Sunday morning, October 27th, 2024. So Kathy Connors, who is a friend from college, she has a plan where she texts people every morning. So I get some kind of quote, some kind of motivational stuff. And today was the day I felt like talking, which is why I got this thing going. And I'll read to you what I wrote to her. If I knew how to work my phone, right? So I'm doing that now. Of course, my phone is old and slow, so now we're waiting for it to pop up. And it still didn't pop up. It's plugged in, but it's here. Oh, here's a new message from Angela. Let me see. I also asked Pat from bowling. She was the most faithful person in sending me cards through things as things deteriorated through this year. Guess I should talk about my fingertips. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm cold all the time or I don't have the right touch, but I really don't like touch screens, and I don't like my phone, and everything takes so long. Or I tap something and instead of reading it, it comes up and does other things. So I always notice my fingers don't work too good. One time I was at Sheetz. Sheetz is a gas station restaurant. No, not really restaurant, a food place, a convenience store for what it really was. And they had touch screens on their food. And one time I was in there trying to get a sandwich and touching the screen and what you want a sandwich, and you want cheese or not cheese, or which of these things, mayonnaise or whatever you chose to make your sandwich. And I'm tapping away at the screen and nothing's happened. So I'm thinking maybe this screen doesn't work. So I go over to the other screen and I'm tapping away. doesn't work. Finally, somebody else is getting their sandwich, and they hit place order, and it went. So I said, would you order my sandwich for me, please, because I can't get these touch screens to work. So how insane is that? So I'm quite aware that I'm not very good at touch screens. But anyways, here we go. I finally got the message I sent to Kathy. She's up in the Finger Lakes area of New York, in some town that most of us can't pronounce. And goodness, this looks like a long message of what I wrote to her. So here it is. Good morning, Kathy. I guess I'm going to share with you my weird sensation when I got up this morning. I got awake, went to the bathroom. I'm waking up and touching my legs, feeling that leather-like skin, looking at my skinny arms and feeling a new pain in my hip and my leg that I never had before. I'm trying to drink fluids and eat a little bit, but it's just kind of weird to watch your body die while you're perfectly sane and mentally aware of what's happening. I'm trying to hang on until November 16th when we're going to have an open house, but people are coming to visit at my request periodically now, and to stay with me and to visit with me. So 2 gals from pickleball were here yesterday. Those 2 gals were Sandy and Martha. And poor Sandy, she's had 2 major pickleball injuries. She had broken her wrist, and that was badly broken and in bad repair. And then she fell on the court and really wrenched her leg and her knee. So she's still hobbling around. I think that happened like in April or June. It's been a long time. So they were here yesterday for an hour and a half. So it's really hard to plan all this because some days I have good days and some days I have bad days. I told her the story. I remember when I was pregnant, my body was growing a baby and my body was doing its own thing. I had no control over what my body did, and I thought about that a lot at the time. Now it's the same thing. My body's doing its thing to leave the earth, and I'm just watching it happen. I'm trying to get Robert to get me a voice to text or some videos so I can make some statements about my life, which is what I'm trying to do now. Make some statements before I leave. I figured I'd start with just talking this to you this morning. Love you and all our memories of great times together when we were young. And this is to Kathy Connors because she's one of the college gang. The girls in the college gang turned out to be what we call Kutchall, Kimmel, Kittner, Kutchall, Connors, Kimmel, Kittner, Ort. So that is Kathy Kutchall Stevens, Connors, Kathy Connors Ferguson, Joanne Kittner, Horanik, me, Donna, Ruth Kimmel Butterbush, and Rhonda Ort. I met Rhonda when we were in 3rd grade. She was in 3rd, I was in 4th, I think. Back when we lived on Allendale Road that wasn't even called Coover Street yet. And we had wonderful times in that neighborhood. And I have good memories of that neighborhood and the kids in that neighborhood. Rhonda and I stayed friends all through our lives. We had some rough spots, of course, every friendship does, and she was busy, and she was married twice to Dave, who was a great friend of us, and then to John. I don't even know if that was his first name. Her son was John and Jennifer. I guess it was Bob Siegel. I have to think about that. I was never really close to him during that period of her life. And then she worked at the Navy Depot. I worked at the Navy Depot when we were in college. We roomed together at Shippensburg for 3 years. And that's when we had the gang with the two Kathys. Pam was included in that, but she didn't stay at college the whole time straight through like we did. And then Rhonda and I stayed friends. And when I moved to North Carolina, I would go to Pennsylvania and do homeschool evaluations, and I would stay at her house as well as staying at other people's houses. That was always fun. And then she got her retirement home after she retired in Carlisle, and she was working still at the Navy Depot for tons of years and retired from there. And then she passed away in February of last year. That was February of 2023. My sister passed away in 2018. So my two besties that I could unload on and talk to were gone. Roseanne and Rhonda. So desperately have missed them in this past time. I have lots of other friends, but sometimes the ones that are the best are the ones that you just click with and you can call and talk to at any moment in time. Rhonda was always a night owl, so she was always up late, so we could talk well into the hours. So anyway, so much for that rabbit trail. I also got a note here from Angela that I didn't even read yet. So let's take a look at that. What you need to do is look at all my messages on my chat and Facebook chats, because you'll get a lot of more stories. Oh gosh, this is going to make me cry. Angela called last night. We talked for a while. We were friends through homeschooling, and she was one of the gals that I did girls' trips with. Of course, I love my husband, but I loved my girlfriends and trips with them just as much. I did trips with Karina and Roseanne. Never really did a trip with Rhonda. And also with Angela, we're talking about Susan, Lori Murray. Oh my, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but that's why this thing with Helene that was so devastating in Western North Carolina, because many of the trips with both friends from Pennsylvania and my North Carolina front row girls, those trips were always in the Western Pennsylvania. Plus, Karina went to ETSU in Johnson City, Tennessee for her master's degree. So when we would visit her at either Bridgewater College or at ETSU, East Tennessee State University, we would always be in those places. We took vacations, even when we lived in Pennsylvania, to North Carolina on both the coast and the Outer Banks. We also did North Carolina mountains. Gosh, it was like before Adam was born. We went to Biltmore House and Chimney Rock. And then we went back to Chimney Rock when we were living in North Carolina. And then when we were visiting Karina, we would go to Massanutten in Virginia, Harrisonburg area, Bridgewater area. We would go to Banner Elk, Pigeon Forge, Boone, Watauga. Karina and I did a lot of swimming at Watauga, or at least once or twice when we were doing our triathlons, and we had to have places to practice in open water. open water is a whole different ball game on swimming than swimming in a pool. So I'll have to tell you about that when I talk about my triathlons. So anyways, that part of the United States was always someplace we were drawn to for vacations, trips, and visiting Karina. One part of the Appalachian Trail that I do love is the line between North Carolina and Tennessee, up in northern Tennessee. Just beautiful places. Also, since Karina has been living in Waynesville after she graduated with her master's, she knows all the hikes and great hikes, knows the parkway so well. Unfortunately, she married a man, Wes, who loves the mountains equally well. So that's very good. On a side trail now, I'll tell you about Robert and I went to hike up to Catawba Falls. That's on the east side of Asheville, closer to Old Fort and Black Mountain. It was closed on the upper level, but it was a wonderful hike when we were doing a lot of hiking. The other big hike we did was we hiked the whole way up Chimney Rock when the elevator was broken. But anyways, that's another story. The story of Catawba Falls is hiking up that trail, and you're going around the trail and you go over a little bit of water and stone hop or get your feet wet a little bit, and then you keep going up the trail, and then you make another turn, and you know the falls is up there because you can hear it, and you make the turn, and suddenly there it is. And you hear stories about people who say things take their breath away. That was one time I remember in my life when we turned that corner and first saw the Salt Falls and all these many little beautiful cascades coming down. And I went, so those are the moments that take your breath away, when you just are so inspired and loving the view. We loved our view when we hiked up Chimney Rock, but that was crazy because we said we probably are not coming back here, so let's do all the trails. So we did all the trails in the Chimney Rock area on that mountain, and then we stayed at a hotel that night, and the next morning neither of us could walk. It was just, we were so stiff and our legs hurt so bad. So we had to drive home that day. Robert's still working. And fortunately, I have had so many blessings in my life that are just things that happen that you know it wouldn't happen unless God had a hand in it. The city we're going to as we go home was Charlotte, North Carolina. And I said to Robert, oh gosh, we can't walk. So anyways, I called around to things that I found, because you have the internet on your phone with you, and said, I'm looking for somebody who has an appointment for a massage on a Sunday afternoon when we come through Charlotte. So lo and behold, somebody told me of somebody to call, and I called, and she was available, and we got in there, and we both had an appointment, and we had to walk up these steps, which really was a challenge because we were doing more steps, because that's what really wrecked our body and made us so tight and tired. Anyways, we got up there, and it turns out she is a physical therapist turned massage therapist, so she knew exactly what to do. And she worked on our legs and our hips and our glutes, and oh my gosh, it was wonderful. I have no idea who she was, how I paid her, what happened, but I could walk down the steps, and we got home, and we were not so sore. It was happily ever after. But that was a crazy thing we did because, they say do your whatever, 1,000, 10,000 steps. I don't know how many we did that way, but it was hours and hours and hours of tramping around Chimney Rock, which now you look at pictures of Chimney Rock after Helene, that was last month. It's so sad. But they're recovering. It's pretty amazing. So, back to this morning, when I was talking to people, deciding it was time for me to make a video, I wrote to Angela. I had a very full life, and there are no words to tell all my friends how they've helped me through life. I know I've made an impact on others too, so I guess it's just very simple to say you've been such a great friend, and we had such fun on our trips. Thank you and love you. And she returns, you've done well. Be proud. You have touched so many people's hearts and sent ripples of love and knowledge throughout the world. You're blessed with a wonderful husband, and your children are both happy and successful. You paved the way to make homeschooling easier for many families. We all appreciate you for that. You have always inspired and amazed me, and you still do. I will always remember our trips. I'm so blessed to call you friend. Thank you for teaching me about kombucha and kefir. I laugh when I remember you're having me taste test different kombuchas in your kitchen, and I didn't like any of them, LOL. But they have helped me. God bless you, Donna. Smiles, laughter, happy trails. Love you lots, Angela. I'm trying to tell everybody how much I love them, and then it comes back doubled. And I'm well aware that I was blessed to have the people to network, which is why Susan and I get along so much, and to share my knowledge. I don't have any degrees with any letters after my name, but I know for sure that God has given me so many things that I have shared with other people. And I guess the keys to this are the homeschooling community, the health community, better eating, taking care of your body. And then we end up in Tennessee doing the New Adventures Club. That was never an intention, but people come and say how much the club has helped them and meet people and made new friends. And I'll tell you, that club is a mishmash of people, but they all love each other. And that's how the Front Row girls are in North Carolina. I mean, we're all different ages, and just got together during COVID and clicked. There were 6 of us girls in North Carolina and 2 husbands. So that's a whole other chapter. There's a chapter in every decade probably of what happened. Anyways, it looks like it's a half hour already, and I could just talk for days. So maybe I'll try that. I don't know how big this is or when it will stop, but I'm going to keep going. So I can't write my memoir, but I can sure talk a lot. I did a lot of seminars and a lot of lectures and a lot of business meetings, so I'm used to talking to people. That's not a problem. So we'll go back to today. Yesterday is when I wanted to go vote. We have early voting Monday through Saturday. We have 4 days next week yet, and then it's closed, and then the election is November 5th, the regular Tuesday in November. And this is for Donald Trump for the Republicans, and the Democrats is Kamala Harris. And it's just been a crazy time in the last 8 years. Things were good, and then COVID came. So the history of the world, there's a lot of different divisions into it and different eras. Medieval times or Renaissance times. That's all AD. And then there's BC, which nobody really was there to tell us what happened during that. But now it's before COVID and after COVID seems to be the way I divide up our lives. That had such an impact on the entire world when they shut down the world and said it was sickness, but it was no worse than the sickness that was back in the times of Woodstock. So that's something I never did. I wasn't quite old enough for Woodstock in the 60s. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. I was born in BC. My birthday's January 27, 1953. I tell people I'm from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, because I really am from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I was born there in the Seidel Memorial Hospital, which was a maternity hospital at the time. And I was the third of 3 girls. My dad wanted a boy because he was the great hunter and outdoorsman and woodsman. But unfortunately, I turned into a girl. And that was the plan of God. His 3 girls. So I have some pictures and movies of when my mom was getting in the car bringing me home from the hospital. And so I had 2 older sisters, but Joyce is my oldest sister, and I never knew her. Joyce Elaine Kimmel. She's buried besides my family in my parents in St. John's Cemetery in Mechanicsburg. It's down towards Camp Hill. And Roseanne is also buried there. So there's 4 of my relatives there. And that's where the Peace Church is, a famous historical church. It's not open to the public except for special events. I guess when they open it and rent it, I think that's still happening there. We lived at 5222 East Trindle Road the first 6 years of my life, where my dad had his lumber business, which was the whole block from Trindle Road back to the railroad track. And I remember as a little girl just loving when he would get orders for lumber. And we would go back to where the train cars were, and they'd park a car there, and he'd unload it with his order for wood. So he had a sawmill first where he had a planer and turned logs into lumber. And he was very specific to me about, you just don't call anything wood. Wood is made from lumber. And if it's not lumber yet, it's still a log. I'm not sure exactly how that goes, but once it's turned into a building material, it's lumber. I remember the smell of the planer. He would get rough hewn logs and run them through this giant machine, a planer. I don't know, as wide as a piano, not as tall as a piano, very long. Put boards in there and plane them down till they were lovely and smooth. My dad also built some houses, including the house that we moved to and the house I was living in on Trindle Road, that house, he went up to the mountains and got the stone to build that house off some mountain land that his mother had had. It had a driveway, and in the heyday of the business, he had a tank of vehicle gas there for his trucks. He always had a dump truck. He always loved coal. So when we had these houses, they had coal furnaces. I remember we had a wringer washer in the basement, and we had a swing hanging down from one of the trees. My dad was always an adventure too, because he loved fun. He would go hunting. He had pictures of his bear. He'd go with Uncle Kenneth and his other friend. And he was fun for us kids because he would hold us up high. He was very strong. He was a wrestler in college. Of course, handling all that lumber and working so hard building houses. But he built stilts. So Roseanne and he would walk on the stilts. My mom and I never did that. Remember the swing in the front yard. And Grandma River was his mother. His dad was killed in a railroad accident in the big, famous, huge Enola yards where he worked. So there's trains and lumber mostly in our background, as well as the typical farmer. So when his dad passed away, I think he was 14, he had some good mentors that got him into college, so he graduated from Shippensburg. He has his Shippensburg teaching degree. He did teach school for a while. Shaw Elementary, I think, is correct on that. And he did work on the Pennsylvania Turnpike as some kind of work that was for the men who were too old for World War I and too young for World War II, so he never had military service. But then his mother remarried Mr. River, so I had a Grandma River instead of a Grandma Kimmel. And when he died, Mr. River, she was living in his house down on 32nd Street in Camp Hill, and his kids from his previous marriage came and took everything and took the house. So she was homeless. So she must have lived with us for a while, because I remember that house. And my dad built her a little house behind the apartment house. My dad built a 2-story, 4-apartment building on Trindle Road down at the 4800 block. I don't really remember that exact address. So he took care of the apartment building, used it to store stuff. So there were 4 apartments and 2 small houses behind it. But that was a good source of income for him to help his business. Later life, after they retired and sold the business, they did a lot of traveling. I think he still built some houses. And of course, he built the house on Allendale Road, which is 799 East Coover Street. He built it there, and Rhonda's dad built their house across the street from it, which is how we met back in those early days when we were just in early elementary school. I had an interesting elementary school experience because it was a new neighborhood going up, and Orchard Crest was the neighborhood that was already built. That's where Sharon and Deb Parlett lived, along with their little brother who came along. When I was a kid, I was really unaware of mothers having children because I was a kid myself, so we were just kids. But we all played together. Karen Fisher did. Sharon Parlett. Scott Gamber was in that neighborhood. Bill Bauer. So none of us had a school. So the elementary school wasn't built yet for that up-and-coming growing neighborhood. So for first grade, I was bused to Shepherdstown Elementary. In second grade, I was bused to Broad Street Elementary. Third grade, part of the year, I guess most of the year, was at the old junior high. So we were in some of the rooms of the junior high, and the junior high kids were there. So we had a cafeteria. And then that was all kind of weird. I think that was when the space race was starting. I remember watching Space Things when I was in third grade there. And then when fourth grade came, the school, which was Filbert Street in Mechanicsburg, was built. So fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. I think it was Mrs. Ackerman for fourth grade, Mrs. Sipe for fifth, and Mr. Deckman for sixth grade. That was the first time we ever had a man elementary teacher. And then that was also the years where I was the first woman to be on the, have a position, I guess, I'm not sure. It was a captain and lieutenant. I was the lieutenant of the safety patrol. So we would walk out with our flags and help the kids walk home and put out the flags when the cars were there to get them to stop. So most of us walked back and forth, and actually there was no cafeteria at Filbert Street, so we walked back home and then came back to school in the afternoon. So I guess we all were in pretty good health then. We just did everything, and they put a path in across the field so the Allendale Road and the Orchard Crest kids could get across the field. We would ride our bikes to school as well. That was fun times. Mrs. Sipe was my fifth grade teacher. She was a huge, old, probably a German woman, and very strict. People were scared of her, but I really liked her. But she was getting sick even in her last year teaching with my class. And then sometimes she'd fall asleep in the classroom. And then one day she never showed up. So the next year I had Mr. Deckman in sixth grade, and there was no Mrs. Sipe to come back that year. So that was the year my mother went back into teaching, and she finished out that year, which is the class behind me, which was Deborah Parlett and Rhonda. So Rhonda and Deb, and then Sharon and I were best buds in our individual classrooms. But as we got into high school then, I don't know how it happened, but Rhonda and I turned into best buds. So she was a year younger than me, and it was actually through Roseanne, my sister, who got a job at the Chalet restaurant. And I'm 7 years younger than her, so I'm trying to figure out. I was just 13 or 14. She was still in high school, so that's really weird. And maybe she actually went to college and bought a car, and she went to Europe. I don't know what year that was. She went to Europe with her best friend, Cheryl, and left her Camaro back at home, a red Camaro that was beautiful. The only thing wrong with that Camaro was she had wrecked it while she was going back and forth to New Jersey, because she moved for her first year teaching to Somerville, New Jersey. And she had been home, and then she went back to New Jersey for her teaching job in her apartment there. Fell asleep on Route 22 and wrecked her car. So it was amazing. She was fine, but the car never was right. When the car came out, the bumper across the back was never level to the ground. It was always kind of tipped. But it was a fun car to be able to drive in high school that I used while my sister was away in Europe. That was fun. Rhonda and I both worked there. Oh gosh, there's so many people there. I've forgotten their names that were working, our friends. It was Jerry, and the last name is Veronicus. And then Jerry's brother's daughter was Kathy Veronicus. She was very good friends with my sister. There were a lot of Greek people coming and going. I loved working at the restaurant. It was fun. I liked flirting with the kitchen staff and the busboys. It was a very thriving restaurant. I started there before I was allowed to punch in and out, because I had to write it by hand, because I was there hours beyond what the work permit said. Sometimes we would work very late. I remember one time we didn't get off till 2, and I went home to bed and then got up to go to high school. And I said I felt so sick when I was at high school. That was one time I went to the nurse's office and slept the whole day because I was so tired from working that late shift, but I didn't tell the school that. But the rooms were huge. They had rooms that we would have banquets with like 300 to 500 people. So that was a lot of dishes, a lot of chairs, a lot of setup. So we would go in right after school and set up the tables and put the chairs around and put the carrots and celery and radishes in little cold containers and put them in the refrigerator. So we'd put them on the table and did the settings and the tablecloth and all that and prep for when they'd come. And all the people would come. That's when I learned how things work in a restaurant, and that's things we don't talk about because those are things that you wouldn't eat in a restaurant if you knew what sometimes goes on. But they did all their baking from their rolls. They did baking for their pies, and desserts, displayed them in a nice cabinet. The best pies were the strawberry pies. Oh my gosh, they were wonderful. The rolls were very good too. Put them in the roll warmer. Almost every banquet we did had those dishes of raw vegetables, carrots, celery, and radishes. We put those on the table, and then in the other 2 containers of this triad metal holder thing would be the 2 kinds of dressing for the salad. And then we'd have fruit cup in a sherbet type dish. So it was always the sherbet, the salad, the raw vegetables, and then it's the meal, and as a dessert. Served a lot of banquets and a lot of food. The stuffed chicken breasts were good. Sometimes we got to eat the good stuff at the end of the day. So that was good. So let's see, this is all high school. And my first job working in a restaurant. I like getting tips. So I would give some of the money to my mom because she started a savings and I had a savings because I didn't really need cash for my personal expenses. Save that up for college. So that was elementary, junior high, and high school. The only only thing I did for sports in high school is I did go out for the swim team for a couple practices, but I didn't really compete. What I did do is played the clarinet all through elementary school, junior high, and the junior high band, the senior high band, and then played when I went to college at Shippensburg, and that was great because when you're in the band, you get a lot of opportunities to travel and meet new people. So that was wonderful. I loved all the football games we went to and the concerts we played for other schools in the region. That was always fun. I remember in college when we went to other places, they would house us, so we wouldn't stay at a hotel or anything. We'd get in the bus, take our instrument, our little overnight bag, and sometimes we would do multiple concerts on the road, like one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and then the same thing the next day and come home. So I always loved music. I was never first chair or anything, but I just was part of the band and marching band. So all this time we lived on Coover Street on Allendale Road and stayed there. And that was the house that I left in 1975. Left there in 71 to go to college, roomed in the dorm for 3 years in an apartment with Rhonda as my roommate senior year, and then graduated from Shippensburg in 1975, and then married Robert in August of 75. So looking at today, it'll be almost a whole year, about 10 months until our 50th anniversary. My mom didn't make her 50th anniversary either. This is a new chapter. This is about the family. So we lived on Trindle Road, and I never met Joyce. So I told you that. Joyce, I think, was born, what would that be? 6, 7, 39 maybe? 1939, she was born. Don't know much about her, but my parents did talk about her and were so sad that she passed away when she was 14. It's always hard when parents lose their children, so I'm grateful that never really happened to me, especially after 14 years of raising them. She went to the Cumberland Valley School District School, and she was a Girl Scout. And that's when the polio epidemic came, and Kenny, my cousin, had polio. There's several other people in the family, I think on my mother's side, that had it. But she ended up in the hospital in an iron lung, and one of the many that died, even though many did survive it. So that's when I grew up thinking that everybody had a plot, because we would go to her gravesite at St. John's Cemetery, and there was a stone there that had John I. Kimmel and the date he was born, which was 1911, and then Ruth B. Kimmel in 1912 and a dash. So the places were all ready for them. And then it said Joyce Elaine Kimmel, and it said, I think the date 1939, we'll have to look that up, to 1952. That was September, I think, of 52. 52, and I was born in January 53. So there were times in my life where I felt that I was like a replacement for her. I don't know why I thought that. I was me and Joyce was Joyce, but my mom had another little baby. So her babies were every 7 years. It's a big difference. My kids are 5 years apart. So we were kind of like only children because my sister was in high school when I was in elementary. By the time I got to junior high, she's in high school. And by the time I got to high school, she graduated and is in college. So we never really had much together. But I remember when I was less than 6, before we moved to Coover Street, I would beg to go and do things with her. And I was never allowed because she always had privileges beyond what I had. So I would end up staying home. I remember being very shy in elementary school. I didn't like to talk to people. Some of it may be because my dad had a business that was behind our property. So there was customers all the time, and customers would talk to you or ask you silly questions. Or I had a hat one time that I really loved because I had my name embroidered on it in a machine stitching. And it said Donna, and then one of his customers was teasing me about, oh, is your name Donna? Why are you wearing Donna? And kind of just being a silly man. And I never wore that hat in public after that. So I was pretty sensitive. And I was sensitive to the fact that my mom was older and she wanted to do things. I used to tell her about wearing granny shoes because she was 40 when she had me. So, she's hitting 50 by the time I'm 10. But I'm not sure where I'm going with this, the fact that she was older. But I was sensitive back to that because I was very shy and wouldn't talk to people. So all the speeches and lectures and all the talking I've done since then, even now, I have many, many, many words inside of me in my head. So I tease myself that I have all these words that I didn't use up in elementary school. In fact, the second grade teacher was Mrs. Sansbury. She was funny because she used a ruler and wrote with a ruler, so her signature was flat in the bottom because she didn't ever go below the line. And she was a really good teacher. I was very fortunate. Mechanicsburg had really good elementary teachers. My mom said that we were of the age when the teachers were just wonderful. And she said the class that she taught in 5th grade when I was in 6th was like the last really bright kids. Most of the kids I was in class with at Filbert Street School were doctors and dentists and prominent people in town. So we were in the high academics, most of us. So anyways, Mrs. Sansbury did visit everybody's house at some point during the year to get to know their family and see what their environment was, which sounds very invasive to me at this time, but I liked when she came to the house and looked at my desk and looked at my bedroom. But the whole time she was there, I didn't even talk to her. A lot of times my mom would drop me off when she would go to bridge club or leave me with Grandma. Grandma was okay. Grandma River I would play Chinese checkers with, and she would always make some good food. She made everything from scratch like the old days in her little house behind the apartment house. I remember her grating cabbage by hand and making coleslaw, and then she would put in the coleslaw probably some mayonnaise or oil, but then she'd also put in it marshmallow fluff and pineapple. So that cabbage was really a wonderful sweet dessert. It was very good. I have no idea what, I guess nowadays you just go to Google and ask for a recipe with those ingredients and you'd probably find it. Speaking of that, one time this was when I'm older and married and technology was just coming around, and Roseanne was still old school at the point, and she called me and said, I cannot find my copy of my magic cookie bars. And she said, I looked in the drawer and I looked in my cookbook, and I said, well, did you Google it? And she goes, no, I forgot about doing that. So it was very hard and slow for me and Roseanne, both of us, to get into the technology age. So that was a funny thing that happened. So anyways, I spent a lot of time with my grandma doing things. She would crochet the edges of washcloths and embroider on pillowcases, did kinds of arts and crafts. Actually, I'm not sure what year it was. I was older. I don't think she was alive then, or maybe she died when I was like 12. I'll have to look up that date. But I did take a knitting class down at one of the yarn stores in Camp Hill. I think Rhonda did that too with me. And the only thing I have to show for that is a fairly well-made beige sweater. And what I did win was I got the award for Most Improved Knitter, only because I was so bad to start and didn't know what I was doing and couldn't hold the tension to get even stitches and stuff. But I finally conquered that, and I still can knit. I don't crochet much except chain. And I did lots of stuff. In my early years, starting the family, I had all that nesting stuff happen, so I made a lot of stuff during those years. And that's where we were affiliated, which a lot of people don't know, that we went to the Mormon church for a while, even though we were married in the First United Methodist Church on Frederick Street in Mechanicsburg. That was later, but those Mormon women do all the stuff they can, and they do all the needleworks, and they just are the pioneer women, so I learned a lot of stuff from them. Anyways, I was shy, back to that, and didn't talk much through elementary school, but high school and college was good. The best thing about band was you got to meet people. The freshman college band students who were going to join band went to campus a week before the students were coming in, so that was good. You got to meet everybody in the band, and you had band practice for the football games and stuff prior to the entire student body there. So I, again, was blessed with doing things without even knowing it that were going to help me in my social life, because I knew people when the rest of the students came to campus. So we kind of got a head start on friendship. So that was very good. And then after that, somehow I learned to talk. I talked in front of people. I cannot tell you all the talking I did. But I did still stay at the restaurant, the Chalet restaurant on Route 15 in Dillsburg. I stayed there until the year before my senior year, I think. Or if it was just the year, maybe it was the year I graduated. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. And then after I was in college, I did summers working for the Army Depot in Mechanicsburg. The other thing I did during these years from like 13 to 18 or 20 was I was in the Rainbow Girls. So I was worthy advisor and worked my way up through the offices, which is how you do that. Did a lot of memory work, scriptures and the teachings. We all wore white dresses. And then at some point, they would have dances. So I was somewhere, I think I was up at Penn State campus because we would have our convention up there every year. What year it was, I would have to think about that. But there were a bunch of us girls there that needed escorts because we didn't bring our own boyfriends with us. I didn't have a boyfriend. And they had this row of these men who had volunteered to come to the convention and escort these girls. So I saw the lineup of guys. They looked okay. I'm watching them, and then they announce your name, and whoever wants to be your escort comes up to you. So I remember eyeing up this guy. It turns out his name is Larry Pisano, thinking he looks very anxious and he's just eyeballing me. And I didn't know if I wanted him to be my pick because I wasn't picking. But I stood there, and as soon as they said my name, he comes tearing out of the line and stands beside me because he obviously picked me. And we did date for senior year of high school at least. Maybe a little bit of the beginning of college. And he probably wanted to get married. His family was from Moulton, Mohntton, outside of Reading. We went up to the Reading Pagoda for a date one time where we overlooked the city. Turns out Larry was a dancer. So he did one of the dancers in Fiddler on the Roof, so I went to that show. And he was the oldest. I think he had one, maybe two little sisters. I can tell you why we broke up. He probably wanted to get married. In fact, he came back to visit later, a couple years later, to see what was happening when I was already engaged to Robert, who we called Bob back in the day. So I said, no, not interested. But he wanted to check on me. No contact since then, so that had to be 1974. So anyways, he was a dancer, and he helped me look good on the dance floor. So I got a lot of comments among my peers that didn't know that I was a dancer, which I really wasn't. But dating him, everybody, I don't know where we were. We were at some dance. Must have been a high school prom, too. There were a couple dances that Larry was my companion partner. But everybody always says we look so good because he could swing me around and pull and do things and make my dancing look good. So that was his talent. He was a firefighter. But then when I met and engaged to Bob Botterbush, it turned out I married a man who hated to dance. I'm going to finish up on dancing and then take a break because we're at an hour or so. But anyways, Robert and I went to, have to ask him which it was. It was a dance at Wisehaven, the big event hall in York. It was there. So it had to be his work Christmas party, which his work had wonderful Christmas parties when your graphic service was run by the founder, the dad. His business changed a lot when the son took over. But anyways, We went to the Christmas party. They had wonderful Christmas parties. They gave away all kinds of stuff. That's when Robert got his Craftsman of the Year award one year. But this is probably our first Christmas party, and we're sitting at a table. And I said, "Are you going to dance with me?" "No, I don't like to dance." So we do have some things, talk about dancing a lot. And there was what he eyed up as being a wallflower type couple sitting at the table across the room. So he says to me, "If that couple over there gets up and dances, then I'll dance." Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because that was not a wallflower couple. As soon as the music comes on for the dance section after dinner, they're the first ones up. So he was out of luck for that. I'll have to ask and see if he remembers that. So this is all over the place. So I hope when I do more of these, I'm not repeating things, but a lot of fun stories and a lot of good things happened. My first job and band and first dates.